Welcome to this lecture on evolutionary biology. Today, we're going to explore a fascinating and dynamic concept known as frequency-dependent selection. In standard natural selection, we often think of a single best trait winning out over time. But what happens when the rules of survival change based on how many others share your exact same traits? We will discover why being different is sometimes your greatest advantage, and why blending in is sometimes the only way to survive. Let us dive in. To understand this concept, imagine you are playing a massive game of rock, paper, scissors with 100 other people. If you notice that 90 people always choose rock, what is your best move? You would naturally choose paper to win against the vast majority. In this scenario, the paper strategy is highly successful simply because it is rare, while the rock strategy becomes a losing move precisely because it is too common. This exact same logic applies to survival and reproduction in the natural world. The evolutionary advantage of a specific physical trait or behavior often depends entirely on how many other individuals in the population share that same trait. Now that we understand the basic intuition, let us look at the formal definition. In evolutionary biology, frequency-dependent selection occurs when the evolutionary fitness of a phenotype depends on its relative frequency within a given population. There are two main types. In negative frequency-dependent selection, a trait becomes more advantageous when it is rare. This prevents any single trait from taking over. Conversely, in positive frequency-dependent selection, a trait becomes more advantageous as it becomes more common, rapidly eliminating rare traits. Unlike directional selection, which always favors one extreme, this is a moving target where the best trait constantly changes based on the population's current makeup. You might be wondering why this mechanism is so crucial in the grand scheme of evolution. Without it, populations would quickly lose their genetic variation. Standard natural selection would simply drive the single best trait to absolute dominance, wiping out all other variations. Negative frequency-dependent selection acts as a powerful balancing force against this. By constantly shifting the advantage to whatever trait is currently rare, it ensures that multiple different versions of a gene, known as alleles, can coexist indefinitely in a population. This balancing act we just discussed is not just a theoretical concept, it is essential for survival. This genetic diversity provides the raw material needed for a species to adapt to changing environments and entirely new diseases. In the real world, this mechanism explains some of the most fascinating biological mysteries. It is the reason why we see stable mixtures of different immune system genes in human populations. It also explains why certain lizard species maintain diverse, brightly colored patterns, and why competing birds display varying behavioral strategies during mating season. To truly understand how this works, let us look at a simple mathematical model that calculates fitness based on frequency. The formula is W equals W0 minus S times P. Let us break down these symbols. The variable W represents the total evolutionary fitness, meaning the overall ability to survive and reproduce. The symbol W0 is the baseline fitness, when the trait is practically zero or extremely rare. The variable P represents the current frequency of the phenotype in the population, ranging from 0 to 1. Finally, S is the selection coefficient, which measures how strongly the frequency impacts the fitness. Because there is a minus sign, as the frequency P increases, the overall fitness W decreases. This perfectly models negative frequency-dependent selection. Before we calculate the math, let us look at the biological setup of a classic real-world example. In Lake Tanganyika, there is a fascinating species called the scale-eating cichlid. These fish survive by sneaking up behind larger fish and biting off their scales for food. They come in two distinct genetic variations, one with a mouth twisted to the right and one twisted to the left. Right-mouthed fish must attack the left side of their prey. Because prey fish are smart, they learn to guard whichever side is being attacked most frequently, setting the perfect stage for negative frequency-dependent selection. Now that we understand the biological setup, let us calculate the fitness. Imagine right-mouthed fish become dominant, making up 80% of the population. So P equals 0.8. We are given a baseline fitness, W0, of 1.5, and a selection coefficient, S, of 1.0. We start with our negative selection formula. W equals W0 minus S times P. We plug in 1.5 for baseline fitness, 1.0 for the selection coefficient, and 0.8 for frequency. Multiplying the selection coefficient by the high frequency gives 0.8. Subtracting this from 1.5 gives a final fitness of 0.7. Because this value is low, the right-mouthed fish will struggle, allowing the rare left-mouthed fish to multiply. Now that we have seen how negative selection maintains balance, let us explore the opposite force, positive frequency-dependent selection. In this scenario, a trait becomes more advantageous as it becomes more common. Instead of preserving diversity, this type of selection acts as a unifying force. It eliminates variation and forces a population to conform to a single common standard. Individuals with the most common traits receive a massive survival bonus from their environment, while rare mutant traits are quickly eliminated. A classic example of this occurs in poisonous butterflies that use bright warning colors to tell predators they taste terrible. This brings us to the mathematical representation of positive frequency-dependent selection. The formula is W equals W0 plus S times P. Notice that we are using a plus sign here instead of a minus sign. This fundamental change reflects the core nature of positive selection. The variables mean the exact same things as before. The symbol W is total fitness, W0 is the baseline fitness when rare, P is the frequency, and S is the selection coefficient. However, because of the plus sign, as the frequency P increases, the overall fitness W also increases. The more common the trait becomes, the higher the survival bonus it receives. Before we apply our new formula, let us set up another biological scenario. This time, we are looking at positive frequency-dependent selection in poisonous heliconius butterflies. These butterflies use bright red and black wing patterns to warn local birds that they are toxic and taste terrible. However, birds are not born knowing this. They must learn by trial and error. If a warning pattern is extremely rare, birds will not recognize it and will eat the butterfly by mistake. But if a pattern is very common, birds learn quickly to avoid it, providing a massive survival shield to the entire group. With the biological context in mind, let us calculate the survival score. Imagine a specific warning pattern is very common, making up 90% of the population, so P equals 0.9. The baseline fitness, W0, is 0.2 because rare patterns are not recognized by birds. The selection coefficient, S, is 0.8, representing strong bird learning. We start with our positive selection formula, W equals W0 plus S times P. We plug in our values. Multiplying 0.8 by 0.9 gives 0.72. This is the massive survival bonus they receive because predators have learned to avoid this common pattern. Adding this to the baseline gives a final fitness of 0.92. Because this pattern is so common, these butterflies will thrive. Now that we have calculated both scenarios, let us look at this graph to visualize the concepts together. On the horizontal axis, we have the phenotype frequency, ranging from 0 to 1. On the vertical axis, we have the evolutionary fitness. The blue line sloping downwards represents negative frequency-dependent selection. You can clearly see that when the frequency is low, the fitness is at its highest, giving a rare advantage. Conversely, the red line sloping upwards represents positive frequency-dependent selection. Here, fitness starts low but climbs steadily as the trait becomes more common, illustrating the common advantage. The intersection point shows where both strategies might temporarily yield the exact same fitness. To wrap up our lecture, let us review the most important ideas we have covered. Frequency-dependent selection is a dynamic process where the evolutionary value of a trait is entirely dictated by how common or rare it is in the population. Negative frequency-dependent selection favors rare individuals, acting as a biological balancing act that preserves vital genetic diversity over time. On the other hand, positive frequency-dependent selection favors common individuals, acting as a unifying force that drives populations toward a single shared trait. Understanding these mechanisms is essential, as they explain the incredible stability of diverse traits in nature. You now have a solid grasp of this fundamental evolutionary concept.